From MTN News, you're watching Montana This Morning.
The president's COVID-19 diagnosis having an immediate effect on the presidential campaigns. Coming up, find out what's changing and what's not.
I'm Gabby Crevet, and coming up, we'll hear what one medical expert is saying about the increase in COVID-19 cases in the state of Montana.
It is 6:30 on this Monday. Chet Lehman, Matt Elwell with you here. A lovely weekend. In fact, a little warm at times. Beautiful out right now for the most part. Not a bad morning.
It's really not. Most areas actually mild. There's a little crisp feel to the air as you step outside. 41 in Belgrade, 45 in Bozeman, 27 this morning in West Yellowstone, 35 in Butte. Our skies are generally clear. There are some showers in parts of Montana, and that's providing a little bit of cloud cover, very thin veil of clouds. I'll spit it out. Is it Monday already? Temperature topping out around 70 degrees today, maybe the low 70s for many areas in southwest Montana. I think we are looking at a pleasant week, but we do have a chance of rain in the forecast. I'm going to talk more about that from the Billy and Auto Weather Patio in just a little over 10 minutes.
Thank you, Matt. 6:31 now. Topping news this half hour. President's COVID diagnosis is impacting campaigning with just 29 days to go until Election Day. Our Joe St. George has a quick look at what has changed since President Trump tested positive.
The biggest and most obvious impact from President Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis this morning is he is off the campaign trail. Beyond that, this is what we know and what we don't know. The president, again, is and will continue to be in quarantine, as at Walter Reed this morning. But even if he's able to leave there soon, he'll have to be in quarantine, presumably in the White House. The exact length of that quarantine is unclear. Of course, there are no rallies during quarantine. As for future debate questions, well, there is a vice presidential debate in Salt Lake City on Wednesday. It's going ahead as scheduled. One big change, the candidates will now be seated 12 feet apart from each other. As for Joe Biden, he is going ahead with in-person campaigning. He'll be in Miami, Florida today and will participate in a nationally televised town hall. Biden is also set to travel to Arizona on Thursday. Biden's campaign, though, has temporarily pulled all negative ads against the president. Now, all weekend long, Vice President Mike Pence has been taking COVID-19 tests and testing negative. As a result, he'll resume campaigning midweek. Of course, the debate on Wednesday, and he's set to travel to Arizona on Thursday. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
6:32 now, back here at home. Last week, the state of Montana saw a significant increase in daily reported cases of COVID-19. MTN's Gabby Crevet spoke with a former network medical correspondent, Dr. Nancy Snyderman, for her take on those rising numbers.
On Saturday morning, Montana reported 501 cases of COVID-19, setting another daily record for the state. And some medical professionals are concerned that this could put a strain on hospitals and communities across the state.
So we still have time to turn this number around.
Dr. Nancy Snyderman says the increase in COVID-19 cases in Montana posed some concern.
One, obviously, is that the hospitals in our cities could get overrun quite quickly. But now let me take you out to rural Montana, where some of the small hospitals may have skeleton crews, may have traveling doctors and nurses, may only have one or two ventilators.
One of the biggest concerns when flu season collides with an uptick in COVID-19 cases, both in Montana and across the country.
When those two crash together, we may see more than the 30, 40, or 50,000 people who die annually just from the flu collide with what may be hundreds of thousands of people getting terminally ill with coronavirus.
Which means this year, more than any other year, Dr. Snyderman says everyone, particularly those over 65 years old, should get their flu shot. And Snyderman says keeping in mind the basics will be critical in keeping COVID-19 contained in Montana.
Assume someone you come into contact with might have the virus, and your best defense still goes back to those boring three things that we've been talking about since March. Wear a mask, wash your hands, socially distance.
When asked how President Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis might affect the way Americans view the disease, Dr. Snyderman said,
I hope that when people look at the fact that the super spreading event may have been an outdoor event in the Rose Garden, that we'll start to realize that being indoors is even a larger threat, and that being outdoors still requires social distancing.
And even with a week of record-setting COVID-19 daily reported cases in the state,
in Montana, we can bend the curve. For sure, we can bend the curve. but only if we're all in this together.
Reporting in Gallatin County, Gabby Crevitt, MTN News.
In other headlines this morning, the American Heart Association raising concerns about women and heart disease. New study shows just 44% of women are aware heart disease is a leading cause of death. That's down from 65% back in 2009. Lack of awareness rose the most in women ages 25 to 34 and among women who identified as Hispanic or non-Hispanic Black. The American Heart Association says it wants family doctors, obstetricians, and gynecologists to educate younger women about risk factors that they may have experienced when they're starting a family.
A lot of risk factors that occur during one's pregnancy or adverse risk factors such as gestational high blood pressure, gestational diabetes, something called preeclampsia, where your blood pressure becomes very high and you spill a multitude of proteins. Those are actually risk factors for women in the future to have underlying cardiovascular conditions.
Now, the American Heart Association says women need to be aware of symptoms that may indicate a heart attack, but could be mistaken as something less severe. Those include shortness of breath, jaw pain, nausea, vomiting, and indigestion. The association also wants women to be aware of less common risk factors for heart disease.
Heart disease is an inflammatory process. So if you have underlying inflammatory conditions such as autoimmune disease like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, for example, or even inflammatory bowel disease, that can put you at a higher risk for heart disease.
The American Heart Association says 80% of risk factors are preventable. Those include obesity, diabetes, smoking, and alcohol use. While COVID-19 continues to impact the sports world, that means it's also affecting us here in TV. Because of the rescheduling of the Patriots Chief game from yesterday afternoon, they're going to now play it tonight. The KBZK KXLF schedule is going to change as well. Tonight, the MTN 5:30 news will air at 4 o'clock, followed by the CBS Evening News at 4:30. The NFL kicks off at 5, and then Big Brother will be on at 8 after the game. If you can't catch our news at 4, remember you can watch MTN News anytime with the KBZK and KXLF streaming apps. You can download those from your favorite device. Stay up to date on your schedule, a schedule that works for you. 6:37 now. Do you find yourself reaching for a snack or a cool drink more often during the pandemic? Well, it turns out you're not alone. Find out just how big that trend is when we come back. But first, here's Anthony Mason with a quick look at what's coming up at 7 o'clock.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS this morning, President Trump's medical team says he could be discharged from the hospital today. We'll look at what may lie ahead for the president's treatment and how his coronavirus diagnosis could affect his campaign and the election. Also, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy will join us. We'll ask about his state's efforts to track down more than 200 people who may have been exposed to the virus at a fundraiser with the president. And rocker Lenny Kravitz has a new memoir. We'll talk with the Grammy winner about the journey to finding his voice and how being a rock star is both a blessing and a burden. All that coming up when we see you at 7.